Hello, everyone. I'm excited to welcome today Miss Natalia Quintana-Feliciano. She's a journalist, writer, poet, feminist, and all around cool person who's worked with various media. And we met through a writers group in the DC area, and I'm excited to ask about her upbringing with roots in Puerto Rico as well as Colombia, and how TV shows might affect immigrant or multiracial children as they're growing up, as well as her thoughts on hyperlocal journalism. So, thank you so much, Natalia, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you. And first, I'd like to begin by asking you about your childhood and upbringing. Could you tell me where you were born and raised?
Yeah, so I was born in Puerto Rico in San Juan, and I lived there just for a year, and moved over to the States. So I was in New York very, very briefly as a baby, but I grew up in Maryland, in Germantown, which is like kind of a suburb. It's like a 45 minutes away from DC. Um, and yeah, I grew up in Maryland. That's where I have a lot of Maryland pride. I then after graduating college, I lived in Virginia for a little bit. So I've been all around DC, Maryland, Virginia. That's kind of my region of like upbringing.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
And could you tell me a little bit about your family history? You mentioned that you were born in Puerto Rico, but you also have roots in Colombia, right?
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family is Puerto Rican. My dad's side of the family is Colombian. Which you would think with that combination I would know just from birth how to dance, and I don't. And it's really upsetting. It's just a big downer. I am good at pretending to know how to dance, but if an actual salsa dancer who knows how to dance salsa looks at me, they'd be like, "Oh, she doesn't know what she's doing." Um,
Oh.
but but I'm a lot closer to my Puerto Rican side.
Mm,
And that's just because, I grew up with my mom. I grew up with a single mom. And I know a lot more about that culture and that side of the family, but I'm still trying to like get to know more about Colombia. And my sister went recently and it was a really big deal, and I'd like to go someday.
mhm.
But yeah, so those are the two cultural like spheres that I'm from. Hmm.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for your mother to not only raise you alone, but also move to America. But what was the
Hmm.
impetus behind that? I'm sure that she had family in Puerto Rico, but did she leave them or did she move with them or?
Yeah, so I was born with a rare syndrome. It's called the Russell Silver syndrome. And that really shaped a lot of my upbringing and my identity as well. And there was a kind of like the worldwide specialist, which we were really blessed to find. She was in New York at Mount Sinai. So
Mm,
I had to go visit her pretty much every month. Especially I think more when I was a baby. So yeah, my mom ended up going to New York, and we were right next to Mount Sinai. And so for a lot of my babyhood, I was in and out of hospitals and things.
oh,
That was
wow.
something I was very used to, um, up until I was 13. I had to take artificial growth hormone because my body didn't produce growth hormone naturally,
Oh my goodness.
up until I was 13. So yeah, I have a really interesting, I think, medical past that I'm happy to talk more about. But uh, that's why we ended up moving to New York ultimately.
Okay. I'm so
Hmm.
sorry to hear that, and I'm really glad it sounds like it's under control and
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's just like a part of who I am, and like, you know, I, uh, I. It's interesting because like I'm at the stage now in my adulthood where I'm a lot more open about it
Hmm.
and kind of embracing it as a part of my past. Before I would just like kind of not think about it or not bring it up.
Hmm.
I'm in a lovely relationship now where like he wants to know about me and my
Hmm.
past, which, you would think is the bare minimum, but like men. But anyway, um, he really wants to know about my past, and so I've been very open about my syndrome and just kind of learning how to embrace it more, even like writing about it. I'm hoping to write a post
Hmm.
about what it is and how it works because it's really rare. But yeah, I that's ultimately what was the impetus for my mom to move to New York,
Hmm.
um, from Puerto Rico. My Puerto Rican family, my grandma was very sad, but
Hmm.
ultimately, like, everyone knew it had to be done.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you probably had the opportunity to go back a lot and to see your extended
Yeah,
family. Okay, that's
yeah,
good.
thankfully I did. So, I spent a lot of my summers there growing up.
Hmm.
And so I had the pleasure of just like for like for several months of the year I would be in Puerto Rico, which was really honestly like incredible and amazing, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that because like I'm still like totally in love with the island. I love the people. I feel like I'm like that's where my roots are and where my ancestors are from, and whenever I have to leave, I cry on the plane because it's just so emotional.
Hmm.
Um, my grandma says I have a plantain stamp on the bottom of my foot because I was made in Puerto
Oh,
Rico.
oh my God, that's so cute.
Yeah. So I really love being Puerto Rican. I love being going to Puerto Rico, and I went there a lot growing up.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
That is wonderful. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is I think the relationship between Puerto Rico and continental US is really complicated, of course, because of the history, but also
Hmm.
culture and language, and the fact that it's not a state, it's a territory. And so I was wondering, do you have a strong identity about being American at all, or is it kind of a complicated relationship too?
It's a complicated relationship. I am so I in Puerto Rico. There's different political parties, and a lot. I think they're mainly based on, the territorial status of the island, and like you have like the statehood party,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously they want Puerto Rico to be a state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's the kind of the more Commonwealth political party, and there is the independent, which there's like a push to make Puerto Rico independent, which has grown over the years. But
Mm-hmm.
my family, my mom is kind of like she was like a political, like a really big member of the statehood party,
Okay.
and she played a really big role in activism and working on policy on the Hill around that. So I grew up surrounded by, like, I grew up going to protests. I grew up going to, like, they call them caravanas, which is like um, just like people in their cars with flags, and like it's like a parade, like honking
Mm-hmm.
with the American flag.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, so we always, growing up, we'd always fly the Puerto Rican flag with the American flag. And uh, I have my grandfathers, on my mom or my grandma's side, uh, my great grandfather, great uncles, all my great uncles, all the men on that side of the family, they were all veterans in World War II.
Okay.
And I think some even enlisted for World War I. I'm not sure, but I have a lot of American veterans in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, uh, so it's complicated, especially now. Like, I don't know if what I myself align with.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm still exploring that. Um, I kind of have this like American pride that was instilled in me as a child, that, I have a hard time like letting, like, I don't know, reconciling it with
Mm-hmm.
who, the way I feel about Puerto Rico and the United States now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, after Maria, for me, everything changed. Like, after Maria, I was like, why? And also, the infrastructure and everything, like,
Mm-hmm.
got even so much more, uh, you know, broken down, that all the problems just became a lot more obvious. And I had a hard time, and I still have a hard time coming back from Puerto Rico to the United States and realizing, like, seeing, because the lights always go out in Puerto Rico. Our power infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
is really, really bad. And I have a hard time like getting on the plane during a power outage, knowing my grandma doesn't have AC,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that the neighborhood has no power, and then landing in Washington, D.C., where like everything is lit up, and like, there's like things are like, there's like, you see like the MGM, and like I don't know, like
Mm,
and it's just something about that, like it feels so wrong.
mm-hmm,
That now I'm at a point, I think I'm at a crossroads where I don't really know like how to reconcile it, but I'm trying to enjoy that journey and I'm trying to like be curious. I'm trying to like learn as much as I can.
mm-hmm,
Um, I feel like I've had a lot of the immigrant experience, especially, you know, from my dad's side, I definitely have. My dad is an immigrant from Colombia.
right.
But on my mom's side, it's interesting because my mom was college educated in New York,
Mm,
and and Puerto Rico is very Americanized in a way, some would say. Um, so it's hard for me to like I don't consider myself an immigrant per se, just because I feel like I have a privilege that I don't want to overlook. Like I don't need a a green card and stuff
mm-hmm,
and visas, and I think that's a I've come from a place of privilege in that sense.
mm,
But again, it's weird because I've had a very similar immigrant experience. Um, and now with this new administration, like I don't even know if they're gonna be looking at the nuances of that. My
mm,
mom is carrying her passport in her wallet because she's worried, and it's even though it wouldn't make sense for us to be deported because we have birthright citizenship. Like we were naturally, if you're born in Puerto Rico, you're an American citizen.
right.
Um, but we're definitely all kind of in a place of uncertainty right now because it's like how does that will that even matter like when they're looking at you and they see that you're different and they
Mm-hmm,
see that you're Hispanic or speaking Spanish somewhere public um uh where it's unwelcome um but so yeah so I do think I've had a immigrant adjacent experience
mm-hmm,
um and honestly I identify a lot more with that experience than any other here in America.
mm-hmm,
Um, but it's complex. It's weird because I don't want to like take that on and act like, my parents crossed some kind of or my mom crossed like some kind of border or something
right.
because she really didn't. But at the same time, culturally, I do feel like I've had an immigrant experience. There are Puerto Ricans who do consider themselves immigrants. Like
I
there are Puerto
see.
Ricans who like, especially if they're independents and they're pro-independence, like they see Puerto Rico, they want Puerto Rico to be seen as a country of its own, an
Mm-hmm,
independent country.
mm-hmm,
Um, and uh, and having been born into a statehood party and like uh, being raised as like Puerto Rico's a part of the U.S. and like we're proud of that and like we need to have the same rights as Americans now because we're part
mm-hmm,
of the U.S. Like it's
right.
like for me it just depends on how you define immigrant, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Absolutely, yes.
Hmm.
I actually think we have a lot in common because I grew up in Hawaii, which is
Oh, cool.
another complicated region because,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it used to be its own kingdom and then was annexed to the United States, the
yeah,
continental United States.
yeah,
But it
yeah,
is different in that the primary language is English now. And of course,
hmm,
the native population, it's a whole nother different issue.
yeah,
But also the fact that Hawaii is a state too, it's also quite different from Puerto Rico. So,
yeah. Hawaii is very much in the consciousness of Puerto Ricans a lot,
mm,
very often, especially when
I
talking
see.
about politics.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, it's kind of like a don't forget what happened in Hawaii. Like what
Hmm,
happened in Hawaii. Like when whatever way you frame that,
hmm.
whether that's negative or positive for someone,
Right.
it's very much in the Puerto Rican consciousness, like Hawaii and just what happened to it and like the status of it. It's interesting.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, that is really fascinating. And for me too, I also was born in the United States, actually near Seattle, so in the continental United States.
Hmm.
But I spent quite a lot of time in Japan as well. My parents are Japanese, and so in that sense, I also feel like a quasi-immigrant as well. I think that's really fascinating how we have different experiences, but we also have a lot of similarities in that
Yeah.
we think about our American identity in really unique ways, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It can be so nuanced and layered. Like it's not black and white.
Hmm, hmm, for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask about your writing. So, how did you first become interested in creative writing?
I don't remember not being interested in creative writing. I feel like I was always writing since I was really little. Ever since I figured out I could like make things up and write it down, and it's like a thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do this forever. Um, and uh, and then so throughout my life, I've just pursued it. Like I have like little poems that I wrote when I was little about Puerto Rico.
Mm,
That was like Puerto Rico is like my muse as a child. Like I have so many poems of like
mhm,
the blue ocean and the sky and the sand and silly rhyming words. Um, and then in high school, I kind of started to like really. It was definitely like a middle school and high school. I It was a form of escapism for me. I was able to like go into my own world, and the friends that I have, which are still my friends today,
mhm,
um, we all connected over creativity and stories, and we'd like write to each other and trade notes in the hallway, and they would like get really excited about like because I would pick out like the funniest thing that happened to me that day and like make it into a comic
mhm.
and have it was almost like a handwritten like blog that we had with each other where we would like
Wow.
give each other these notes. I have a
Mhm.
shoebox full of them at my
Nice.
place. I've been meaning to go through it just to like laugh. It's just always been something I've felt like has come very naturally to me, and I don't remember a time I wasn't doing it.
Mm-hmm. And do you write in Spanish as well? And if so, do you see any difference between what you express and how you express yourself?
I tried writing in Spanish when I was younger.
Mhm.
I was really into pirates, and I and I wrote a bilingual. I tried to write a bilingual like short story about a girl being taken away by a pirate
Mhm.
ship in
Mhm.
like a flying pirate ship in New York or
Oh,
something.
that's so cool. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I'm wondering if I should go back to it because I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
would
that
totally
was
read
actually
that.
kind of yeah, that was kind of fun. But and I remember that was a really it and again, I was a kid, but like I look back on that and I'm like, that was really interesting. That was a very interesting experience that I never forgot. But I haven't really like written in Spanish since then.
Mm,
Poetry wise, I love Spanish words and I
mm,
love how they just the words have a different spirit to them,
mhm,
and I want to play with that more. I have like put Spanish words into my English poetry.
mm,
Um but and I have some drafts here and there that have some Spanish words in them. Um I'm really inspired by Sandra Cisneros,
mhm.
who she is a Mexican American poet. Um she wrote House on Mango Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but she is probably like my role model when it comes to writing in general. And she likes to like dabble a little bit of Spanish in her English poetry.
That is really cool. The readers do have to know each language, but there are certain things and definitely words that are untranslatable for sure.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think that's a really wonderful idea. And you also, because you mentioned poetry, I also wanted to ask, you have these different ways of expressing yourself, like comics. It sounds like you also illustrate, and prose and also poetry. And of course, there's nonfiction as well. So how do you choose which medium to express certain thoughts with?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think a big part of it is who I'm
Hmm.
writing about.
Okay.
Um, if I am writing a story that I want to bring awareness to, if I'm writing something that I think would, you know, be like needs to be shared in the in a real sense. Um, for example, I did a story on um, a parapsychology department in at University of Virginia,
Hmm.
and that was very much I'm like I knew I wanted that to be nonfiction because
Okay.
it's almost fiction, what it sounds like. It sounds so magical, and like
Mhm.
I love playing with like weirdness and magic in like
Mhm.
the real world. So
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I want to bring this into the real world. If I made it into fiction, I feel like it would lose the wow factor of it, which is this exists in the real world. There's a team of people studying telepathy at University of Virginia.
I had
Um,
no idea.
yeah, it's very cool. It's called the Department of Perceptual Studies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
cool.
I would recommend you check it out if you're interested in that kind of
Will
thing.
do.
But yeah, it's one of my favorite things I've written, and uh, and that I feel was something where it's like this needs to be written in a real world sense. So
Mhm.
that was nonfiction. But if I have like a feeling um, that I don't exactly know how to communicate logically, but
Mhm.
I can put it down and be pretty confident that somebody will read it and feel what I'm feeling,
Mhm.
that would be poetry. Like I would
Mhm.
choose poetry for that. If it's like not really like a lot, like it's not, the other day, for example, um, uh, I was, so I've been obsessed with Bad Bunny's new
With what?
album.
Sorry?
Bad Bunny, he's a Puerto Rican
Okay.
artist.
Oh, I've heard of
Um,
him, I think. Yes.
yes, yes. I've been obsessed with his new album. It's like made for Puerto Ricans.
Mhm.
And there is a song called What Happened to Hawaii,
Mm.
speaking of which, what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And the song, it's not really like a dissertation, it's not an analysis. It just is like this fear. It's like there's this fear, this deep fear in the song. Um, it's just what happened to Hawaii. And any Puerto Rican seeing that song title, um, and hearing that song will understand the feeling.
Okay.
It's not making any kind of like particular direct statement, but it's like a feeling translated into words.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when I feel like I have something like that I want to share, uh, I will go to poetry. I wrote a piece that was published in Strange Horizons. It was my first published piece. I'm still very proud of it.
Mhm.
Um, where I was on a walk and I had just gotten street catcalled, like basically street harassment, and I came back and I had just heard this awful news story about a woman who was murdered walking home, um, and I was just so angry and sad and wanting the world not to be this way
Mhm.
that I just wrote about like a magic, uh, mystical land where women just took care of each other and helped each other heal when they died from situations like that,
Mhm.
and tied it into my Puerto Rican ancestry. So it was like Taino women, which are the indigenous people of Puerto Rico. I'm sorry, this is such a roundabout way of answering, but
No, not at all.
I'm trying to like express. And that was like came out of a feeling of desperation that I
Mhm.
wanted to put out and express and connect with people with. And that was a poem.
Mhm.
Um, and then in terms of just like other forms of poetry and or other forms of writing, um, I think when it's about the story,
Mhm.
I love to focus on that three-act structure.
Mhm.
I love to have my traditional cast of characters, exposition and rising action and falling action, and you know, um, that is when the story is just so good and so delicious that I like really want to put it. I want to use that, whatever structure it necessitates. But I will go to like, drawing comics if I want to express something to some friends, or like,
Mhm.
um, that's when I'll turn to video or audio
Mhm.
storytelling.
Mhm.
Is if I really want to share, piece together those components of a story. Um, and I'll usually do like, more prose.
Mhm.
So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of, it's, I don't really have like a hard and fast rule, but it's more about
Mhm,
feeling. I kind of go by my intuition and what I'm feeling about my idea.
mhm, mhm. No, thank you so much. That really makes sense. And I really admire you for having such a wide toolbox to pick from. Because you talked about your feelings about women and feminism, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about your fascination with the vengeful woman, about how women who are wronged then are portrayed as like witches or ghosts. Or I think that's a really fascinating idea that you mentioned in your blog.
Yeah, yeah, I love the idea of vengeful women. I'm really, really passionate about mythology and folklore.
Mm,
So I love seeing the patterns that show up and like what they say about culture and society. I think like folklore and mythology are it's kind of like how when you're having a problem in real life and you'll have a dream about it and then you'll interpret the dream. I
mm,
think like folklore is like the equivalent of that for like a whole society. Like I
mm.
think we dream in folktales and like a lot of the
Interesting.
problems and things that we want to deal with now or that, the patterns that we're missing, we can find in folktales. And I think
Mm,
one of them is this like just this rage that I think is so often all over the world, so present in folktales about women.
mhm,
Um, and the whole idea of it, it's as a creative, like I want to play with it. Like as a creative, like I want to like, write poetry about it and tell stories about it and really explore it and look at it from all the angles. But also I just think it's beautiful that, you know, the world we live in, women have historically been so subdued and so silenced. And in so many ways, we didn't have the ability to live the life that we can live now. And
mhm,
many women around the world right now, as we speak, don't have the ability to like don't have the right to education or like make the decisions that they want to with their body and their life.
mhm,
Um, but I love that throughout history, there's always been this seed of like wisdom, like the seed of like, you know, knowing that we deserve better
mhm,
and knowing also even from like a patriarchal perspective that that there's something to be scared of because these of you know on the behalf of men who have taken advantage of women.
mhm,
There's so many like Kuroneko is like a really cool
mhm.
movie that is Japanese and it's like I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but uh, I really love it because it's a story. It's supposed to be a horror movie. It's supposed to be
Mhm,
scary.
mhm.
You're supposed to watch that and be like, oh no, but like it's about women who like they're assaulted
Right.
by a group of samurai and they come back from the dead to just like completely destroy them and like I mean it's a horror movie so it's violent. It's really,
Mhm,
but I think like the visceral like revenge um and the thing that has been so feared, it also gives me a sense that there has been some resilience, that the struggle wasn't totally buried and
right.
forgotten.
Mhm,
There's, you know, I think anger can be a reminder of, you know, that you deserve better a lot of the time. I think
mm.
especially for women, like we're told to, you know, to not be angry, to not be a bitch,
Mhm.
to, especially women of color,
Yeah.
especially black women,
Mhm,
this idea of like, why are you so angry? Like, you're such, whatever, you're so angry all the time.
mhm,
And I think a big reason for that is because anger can be powerful and anger can be a useful tool for us to draw our boundaries. And that's something I've been learning too as an adult is like, a lot of the times the angriest I've been
mhm,
has been in situations where I wanted to speak up for myself, and I knew I had to speak up for myself, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know that something was wrong. Like it, the anger, I think, is what is in subconsciously what's inside you saying like, "Hey, like something's wrong. You deserve better than this."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think anger can be a powerful tool. I think it's definitely um, you have to use it the right way. I think it can be really destructive, and
Mm-hmm.
I never, I don't condone violence or anything, but I love just the idea of that, of rage and listening to rage and connecting over the anger that you feel. Um, because it can be beautiful. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially as women, we should find ways to listen to it and not reject it or shut it down. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I'm so obsessed with the vengeful woman trope,
Mm-hmm.
is because it's a lot of it is just feminine anger
Mm-hmm.
um, that I think, needs to be felt and noticed.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. I think it's a really fascinating explanation because I always thought anger is something that's negative and you need to either get over it or find a different way to express it that doesn't hurt people. But I never realized that it's basically, yeah, the feeling that you deserve better. That's such a wonderful and eye-opening way to perceive anger, and I think that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it
Um,
needs to be processed.
yeah.
Hmm.
hmm and I think I don't want to make things too political, but when I feel the most urge to express myself or write things is when things are really difficult, like socially or politically. I think
Hmm.
right now a lot of artists are motivated, and certainly for me as well.
Yeah,
And that's because if you are happy in your everyday life, it's harder to find that motivation, I think, to express yourself in a different way.
yeah, yeah. It can definitely fuel you too. Yeah, like
hmm
righteous anger is not necessarily like that has uh, driven a lot of positive change in the world.
hmm hmm
Hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I also wanted to ask, focus more on your journalism career as well. So I understand that you worked with radio stations and TV stations,
Hmm.
but you're also a creative writer. So why did you decide to pursue a degree in journalism rather than an MFA in creative writing, for example?
The
Mm,
reason why I decided to do a journalism program is because I had um, the pleasure of exploring the American University's journalism and digital storytelling program.
mhm,
So it was not just my program is not just journalism. It's journalism. It has an emphasis on journalism,
mhm,
but the real program is centered around digital storytelling.
mhm,
Because ultimately, like, I think that was what really sold me on it. Because
mhm,
ultimately, I love stories, and journalism is just journalism is storytelling.
mhm,
It's storytelling oftentimes for a cause, for what you would feel to be like something that needs to be told
mhm.
and shared with the world. Um, and if it was just a journalist, so I wouldn't have pursued a degree in just journalism.
Okay.
Um, I was actually torn between the MFA creative writing program and
Mm,
this program.
mhm,
Um, but ultimately, I was able to find a program that not only was it practical in terms of like learning journalistic skills that I could transfer to a news organization,
mhm,
but also really getting into the mechanics of storytelling and
mhm,
how can we use like what you're doing now, the podcasting platform, for example,
mhm, mhm,
um, how you can use that to get your stories across and build these engaging, you know,
mhm,
stories. I got to learn coding.
mhm.
I got to learn how to use like, you know, cameras and microphones and different editing software. Um, and all of that stuff. Like again, it's more about the tools to tell the story that I think I was more interested in studying.
Okay. Okay. That
Hmm.
completely makes sense. And I understand that you recently won a scholarship. Congratulations on
Thank you.
writing this essay about using hyperlocal journalism to combat disinformation. Would you mind explaining
Yeah,
a little bit about your idea behind that?
I think that local journalists are very uh, under recognized.
Mm,
for what exactly they do. Like they, on a personal, almost personal level, in a community level, uh, they are exercising the right to free speech, and they're, you know, uh, using stories on a very immediate level to help us protect ourselves when there's emergencies. Like, who are you gonna go to national news?
mhm,
No, when there's an emergency and you want to make sure your family's safe, you're gonna go to local news.
right.
um, and I just think it holds so much untapped power,
Mm,
local journalism. um, and I think especially now, news stations and national news organizations have become so polarized.
mm,
They're serving just these incredibly wide a wide range of audiences,
mm,
and just painting with broad strokes, which is, on a national level, you know that is necessary sometimes. But
right.
I think especially now, and even, given in light of everything we've talked about how nuanced it is, even to take on an American identity.
Mm,
I just don't think broad strokes are doing it anymore. Like, I don't think that that's the way we're gonna get ahead in understanding each other. And I think that our uh, journalism needs to reflect that. And I don't think it's really reflecting that. I think there's a lot of this nuance missing that I think is only adding to the fuel to the fire. Like, even within the Democratic Party itself, like, there's so
yeah.
much division. And I think a big part of that is just because there's like this lack of empathy.
Mhm,
And what I think local journalism can do for communities is, um, bring all of that down to a level where you are working with your community to build that empathy, and to tell stories that, directly affect people. Like, how are the issues that are happening now nationally? How does that affect people's day to day?
mhm,
Like, I think only local news journalism has the capacity. Local news journalism and independent journalism, um, have the capacity to really get down to that micro level as opposed
mm.
to the macro level.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's so encouraging that there's someone who's really focused on local journalism because I understand that financially it's been really difficult for these
Hmm.
kinds of organizations. And I've read of areas where it's called the news desert because there's no longer the media, and which acts like a government ombudsman in that
Yeah,
area. So the next town over needs to cover their news, and so there isn't really like a watchdog role, and
yeah,
so it's quite difficult. But I really think it's encouraging how someone who's so young and who's about to graduate grad school is really focused on local journalism, because someone like you who has so many different tools is really able to dig deep and probably even report in Spanish too as needed, and really yeah, build a community with the local people that you're interviewing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah, of course. Thank you.
And I also wanted to ask you about your work with, I know you've already left them, but PBS Kids. And
Hmm.
one thing that I found fascinating was your post about Alma's Way, which I understand is a show for children that really focus on Puerto Rican culture. So would you mind explaining a little bit about that?
Yeah, so On This Way is a show on PBS Kids that is about a little Puerto Rican girl named Alma who lives in the Bronx and connects with her community, and in a way that would be really relatable to, I think, a lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of people living in the city.
Mm,
Um, and it's beautiful because it's the first time I've ever seen a show anywhere where, like, it's almost surreal to, like, see something on screen that, uh, it so accurately portrays my upbringing.
mm,
Growing up, like, I remember watching shows on, like, Disney Channel and, Nickelodeon and things like that, where there was one type of family out there,
mm,
and they called each other they called their mom mom, they called their dad dad.
Mm-hmm.
They usually were upper middle class with a really nice house. Their parents were always around a lot of the time. So it's, and I know that that is the reality for a lot of people, but it really, I felt like I just didn't see myself. Like I was watching these shows and these movies too, and
Mm-hmm.
but the crazy thing is that at the time I didn't know that. Like I felt like something was not relatable, but I didn't know what it was. And it was only until Alma came on TV and until I started working on it at PBS Kids and helping with it, um, that that I realized that I was missing out on so much.
Mm-hmm.
That, frankly, like so many, like the majority of like, middle class white American children, American born children, they would like see something and connect in a way that I had no idea,
Mm-hmm.
and that I was missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was only when I saw Alma and I saw, that a visit from your family means like getting all the old family photos out and uh, you know, dancing to salsa or making mofongo, which is the traditional Puerto Rican dish. Um, and uh, I saw that and I was like, oh, like I could have been growing up with this. Like this could have been something that would have really, really changed my perspective on my culture, and
Mm-hmm.
it would make me feel a lot less of an outsider as well. Um, I could have had a show where I could see people calling their mom mommy and
Mm-hmm.
then calling their dad papi because that's what I call my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and and I'm really glad that kids get to have that now. You don't know what you don't have until you realize like what's possible.
So did you get to provide feedback, like in order to make it more authentic, these are the words you need to use, etc.?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I had
Wow,
the opportunity to like
that's incredible.
check out some scripts early on
Mm-hmm.
and share some thoughts about different things and
Mm-hmm.
different wording. I believe I was the only Puerto Rican, or one of the very few Puerto Ricans at PBS Kids at the time. So I feel like I had like a unique inside look, and I was
Mm-hmm.
able to bring that to people and help out with that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that was definitely an honor as well.
Absolutely. And I'm sure
Mhm.
that you really helped many, many children as they were growing up. It's so important to feel seen because it really relates to not only them sitting in front of the television, but also when they go to school. Maybe other children would have watched that show also, so they can relate to them and, become friends faster. And so it really permeates the rest of their lives as well. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear kids talking about Almost Way. The other day, I was at a Puerto Rican like restaurant business thing, and
mm,
um, there was a little girl there, and she was showing people her bomba dance, which bomba is like a traditional Puerto Rican dance, and the
mm,
mom was telling everybody she learned this on Alma's Way. Like there's a show called Alma's Way about a Puerto Rican girl. Can you believe it? And that was really nice to hear.
yeah, wow, that's so incredible. And this is not about children's show, but this is just my personal impression. So I would say about 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago even, it seemed like American adaptations of telenovelas were all the rage. And we saw so many great shows like Ugly Betty, which is on the older side, but also like Jane the Virgin, Devious Maids. And we also saw shows like Fresh Off the Boat, which of course is Asian, but you have a big focus on immigrant culture. And maybe it's just me, but I don't see that many shows like that anymore. And I thought this was a trend; it would just continue, and where it would become the norm. But I feel
Yeah.
like we've pulled away from that a little bit. What are your impressions on that, and why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good observation. And I feel I've sensed that as well. I think that this chronic, like this onlineness of our society now, and paired with kind of the transient streaming nature of things. We don't really have like this is at this time every day, and
Mm,
you know, there's like a million seasons of something like American Idol or something where it's like it's just like a present, it's always present.
mm,
Um, I think things have projects, certain projects have a much smaller window to
mm,
make things work.
mm,
Um, and certain stories have a much smaller window to succeed now that
mm,
everything's moving so quickly um, in the streaming world and in the digital world in general. I
mm,
think that makes it really hard for like people who are like coming from a place of less privilege, people
mm,
like, creators of color, who, maybe they're not like the grandchild or the child of like someone who's already an established director. And they also maybe didn't start out with a ton of money to work on a project. Um, in terms of like Netflix, Hulu, streaming media, it's just everything's like if it's not an instant hit, then get rid of it. And that's just not
mm,
how things work, especially if you need time to understand another cultural perspective.
mm,
Again, this is just
mm.
my theory,
Yeah.
but that's what I think is going on. I just think that, I wouldn't lose hope though.
Mm,
I think you look at a streaming service like Dropout,
mm,
they it's my favorite streaming service ever. And it's really cool because you have an independent group of people who have decided we're going to make media that represents underrepresented people. They've been incredibly successful in a way that's really surprising.
mm,
So I think we just have to, as people of color who are creators in the digital space, we need to be innovative. Like we need to think on our feet, and we need to also like reframe how things have been done because it's not, in order to the formula has to change, I
mm,
think. And maybe that means starting something totally new from the ground up.
mm, mm.
Um, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I've never heard of Dropout, but I'll definitely check it out. Um, and this is probably going to be our last question, but do you have any advice for others who are maybe struggling with their identity or having difficulty making difficult decisions, like where to be based and what sort of career they want, etc.?
Yeah. Well, first off, disclaimer, I'm still figuring it out myself.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a journey.
Uh,
I wrote a post about this in my newsletter, my most recent one, but um, I think we're all raised to believe that we need to follow a formula or
mm,
like a track of some sort. And I, it's hard. It's really, really hard to throw that away. It's really, really hard to be like, but wait, but like, question that
mm,
idea of like, you go to high school, then you go to college, then you get an internship, then you get a job, and da da da. Um, I think that I have been realizing I need to create my own structure. I need to figure out what works for me. The track is like all squiggly,
mm,
and hopefully you get to a point where um, you know what would make you happy, what would make you feel successful. But
mm,
that might not be money. It might not be like acclaim. It might just be something that like you feel you're good at and you get, you know, positive validation from, and then, maybe you have another passion where, like you're writing and you're getting your poetry published.
mm,
That's like a personal example. Like I want to have a poetry career alongside whatever I do.
mm. That's
Um,
great.
I don't think I ever considered that could be possible, that I could have multiple routes to
Mm,
success, that I
mm,
could have that my routes could change and look different. Um, I always kind of saw it as a step ladder, but it's not, and it doesn't have to be a step ladder. You can craft the future you want, and you can customize it as much as you want, and and it's scary because there's so many possibilities, But
Hmm.
ultimately, I think it gives you it's beautiful because you have an opportunity, especially with the digital. That's why I love digital storytelling because
Hmm.
the digital world has opened up so many possibilities to us too.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the advice I would give to someone is to embrace that, embrace
Hmm.
how many options we have now, and embrace that you can change your mind, and embrace that success could mean something different to everyone, but also the whole idea of it is shifting with the times and the technology that we have. Um, just be malleable and adaptable and creative with the life you want to build.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you so much for that. I completely understand what you mean about having multiple careers. And I think
Hmm.
definitely as we're growing up, as a child, you're often asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're supposed to answer with one word, basically, like, I don't know, firefighter or
Yeah.
like
Yep. Exactly.
illustrator. Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's hard to imagine that it's okay to pursue all these different things at the same time. And obviously, if you can't do everything, during one year, then it's okay to like dedicate decades to each and live
Yeah.
different careers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end of our podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to add or?
I just want to thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's been awesome talking to you, and also it's super inspiring to watch you like take the initiative and follow through on something so cool.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, I wish you the best with it. I'm really happy to be on.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalia.
Yeah, of course.